Good afternoon. Welcome to the Public Safety Town Hall meeting. And I want to thank everybody for being here. I feel like I'm on an oral board, so if you guys want to sit up here, I'll ask you a couple of questions on why you want this job or something like that. So actually, I know you could be doing other things. I know they have the Democratic primary debate today. They have Game 3 of the College World Series. You could have been there for that, but you guys are here, so thank you for being here. Thank you, Mr. Larks. Thank you, especially. You're my buddy. And so today's an opportunity for us to talk about public safety. Myself, I'm the Ruben Chavez, Police Chief here, Captain Chris Soria, and Fire Chief Baraka Carter. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we do in our individual departments, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions about public safety. So if I can get somebody to grab me the lights real quick, Willie. Thank you. That's good, Catherine. Thank you. Not there, thank you. So there's a couple of pages I put up here, and you might have seen these before in some of the previous council presentations, but again, this is our police department. We have 30 members of our department, both sworn in and civilian staff, and we're responsible for 24/7 coverage for the police department. We do have a outstanding dispatch center, which is manned by, or I should say woman by, female dispatchers who dispatch for not only for Livingston PD, but also for Gustine PD. I want to talk about real quickly about statistics. The UCR Part 1 crimes, and I've made this presentation before in council, but these are the UCR are basically the more serious crimes that you see up there right now. So the statistics between 16 and 17, you'll see the Part 1 crimes. The biggest one that went up was robberies. We went basically from 6 to 12 from 2016 2017. But overall, their overall crimes were down about 20%. Going from 2017 to 2018, very similar, only a 3% overall increase, but a little bit of a significant increase in our stolen autos. And so 34% increase in stolen autos, and our officers did a great job identifying some of those suspects and arresting them. And if you know some of the legislation that came about over the last several years, Prop 47, Prop 57, it basically made property crimes a low priority, and an effort to kind of reduce prison population. And so some of the effects that took place were a little bit, the property crimes increased a little bit. Calls for service, from 2017 to 2018, we had about the same number of calls overall, priority 1, priority 2, priority 3s, the totals. However, if you look at priority 1s, those are the more serious calls for service. We actually increased about 800 calls for service, which is a lot. However, our priority 3s were reduced a little bit. So, but overall, about the same number of calls. And the response times were actually a lot better for priority 1s. Again, those heavy calls, those calls you want the police there as soon as possible. From the first call coming in until the arrival of the officer, the average time was about 3 minutes. And for a town our size, that's really, really good. However, priority 3s, which are more of the lower priority type calls, increased a little bit. And again, I'm speaking strictly for PD, fire department. They have their own statistics. However, when we get a call that does come in for a fire call, whether it's an accident, whether it's some sort of injury, our dispatchers will refer them to fire dispatch to get those calls out. The reports, and I bring this up to kind of show the overall number of reports taken by our department as well as the Gustine Police Department. If you look at the difference between 2017-18, our PD went up just a smidgen, about 50 calls for reports in 1 year, which is not too bad. If you look at Gustine PD, they went out quite a bit, and some of the reasons is they're actually taking more reports on things that they didn't take reports on before, so they did go up quite a bit. If you look at the incidences are when our officers respond to a call, may contact in the field where they're not taking a report, but they're doing something. An incident report is created, and so our incidents actually went down a little bit. both in Livingston and in Gustine. One of the things we pride ourselves on is putting together strategic plans, and this is actually the 2020 strategic plan is a plan it's a 3-year plan and looking at different goals. This is our second strategic plan we did put out for the PD. The first one was a 3-year plan. This is basically a roadmap for our department members to follow and in making sure our community is safe. And some of the objectives were reducing incidents of gang violence, reducing property crimes, increasing enforcement of narcotics violations, increasing the opportunity for personnel to attend high-quality training, and then increasing public relations and involvement. Those are the 5 objectives, and we have different criteria to rate how we're doing in those areas. One thing that we did do early on about, I think it's about 2012, we had a department-wide management, basically a workshop where we came together and tried to identify ways how we could work closer together as a managerial team to ensure safety of our community. And we came up with a new mission statement. So the mission statement that we came up with as a group was, our mission is to provide professional and law enforcement services intended to impact the quality of life through commitment, education, and community partnerships. And that's been in place since that time. Now, one of the things I did actually last week is I went online to just try to find, I know there's lots of articles on try to improve our relations with the police. One of the things I found interesting was, it was titled 15 Things You Should Never Do When You Get Pulled Over. And while it sounds kind of tongue-in-cheek, it actually had some really good words of wisdom and advice that I have the, if you pull up the author's name or actually the magazine that it came out of, I actually have the link on the bottom if you want to take a look at that. But these are 15 things that you should not do if you ever get pulled over. And I want to go over them real quickly. Don't panic. Again, anytime an officer makes contact in the field with a person, motorist, it's one of those situations we as officers need to make sure that we're safe when we make contact with the residents, whether it's a simple traffic stop for a stop sign. We don't know who we're going to come in contact with. It could be somebody who's very, very dangerous, and we don't know. You know, we're wearing our bands on our badges because we lost a Sacramento officer last week. She was shot through the door by a suspect who had a high-power rifle, and her funeral is actually tomorrow. So it's one of those things, you don't know who you're coming in contact with. So if you panic or act a little different, then it kind of raises our senses, and we want to make sure that we don't do anything, to escalate it. So we, just remain calm. Always wear your seatbelt. If you get stopped, don't take your seatbelt off, because if an officer comes up to you, he might not have seen the seatbelt being worn, and it's better not to be moving your hands around. Just leave your seatbelt on, and you can take that off after you're asked for your license or something to that effect. One of the things is the officer is going to come up to you, he's going to ask you for your driver's license, registration, insurance, and he's going to explain some things. The first thing is you don't want to all of a sudden start hammering with questions, because you want to create an environment where it's actually a mutual, respectful situation. So the officer has a job to do, and the more positive the exchange of dialogue, the more positive the results will be. Now, this is a hard one. Don't argue. I know if you've been stopped for something and you believe you weren't responsible for what you're being accused of, that's not the time to argue. The officers we do make mistakes. We might see something and we don't record it right. We don't see it right. The proper resolution for that is basically court. Let a judicial system look at that and figure out if it's warranted or not. And again, police officers do make mistakes, and police officers aren't going to get upset if they go to court and they lose a traffic ticket. I mean, I worked traffic for many years, and I've lost cases. It's one of those things, and it's up to the judge. That's the proper venue for argument. Don't reach for your license. It goes without saying. Officers are on high alert. They don't want to see a situation where somebody's reaching for something. They don't know what you're reaching for. So, usually the best thing is just to hold on to the steering wheel, and once they ask you for a license, and then you can go ahead and unbuckle and reach for your license. And then don't put your hands out of sight. Don't be fumbling with things in your glove box and things like that. Just keep your hands on your steering wheel, and that's the safest thing to do. Don't admit guilt. That's part of that. That's the article mentioned. Don't admit guilt. Sometimes it's better just to not say anything. And if you know you're wrong, let the facts speak for themselves. Don't leave your car. That's probably one of the worst things you do is getting pulled over and jumping out of the car immediately, coming towards the officer because you want to explain something. I've seen a lot of situations where somebody might be needing to go to the restroom or they're having a baby, something like that. Once the officer, don't jump in a car because that's what really the red flags go up and the spider senses start tingling. Something's going on here, and that's where you want to make sure you're safe and because then it kind of starts to go a certain way that you don't want it to go. Don't resist. And I think this is in the context if you're being stopped for something where it might be a misdemeanor, you might be drunk driving, things like that. You might have a warrant. Don't resist. That's another violation. And go along with the program. If it's something that is legitimate. Again, if it's something you don't agree with, the proper venue for that is in the courtroom. Don't pull over in a potentially dangerous spot. Especially if you're on the freeway, you want to make sure you pull over in a safe location. You don't want to pull in a position where your vehicle's sticking out in traffic, or you're in an area where a lot of traffic is. Just try to pull over in a safe spot, especially if it's a very, very dark spot. Try to find a light stand that you can park under. Don't encroach on an officer's personal space. As officers, we're trained to have more of a character, a practice to be safe, and there's a personal bubble officers have that you should not encroach on. That when you get too close to an officer, we don't know what you're going to do. There's a different training that we go through that teach you, hey, you want to keep a safe distance. They teach you when you're an officer how to stand, how to talk to people, how to keep the distance from somebody. Once you get too close to an officer, then you're basically encroaching on his safety in that bubble, and it has, again, the red alarm starts going off, like, what's this guy doing? So just make sure you stay at a safe distance. Don't do anything before understand your rights. Again, this goes along with the don't admit guilt. If you need to understand your rights, if you've done something where you actually have to be read your rights, if you feel like the officer is going to do something that's not appropriate, whether it's searching you without cause, there's officers aren't allowed to search you under certain circumstances. And if you feel that those certain circumstances aren't met, then you can verbalize the officer, but understand your rights. And if you haven't done research those topics online, that's something I would recommend you do. Don't refuse to sign the citation. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you get pulled over and you end up getting cited for something you don't think you did, again, officers make mistakes, but don't argue it. The proper venue is in court, in the traffic court. Don't get distracted. A lot of times, as officers are talking to you, and they don't need you as a motorist to be fumbling on your phone, doing things, getting distracted. Obviously, having a contact with a police officer is bad enough, but being distracted and causing a little bit of chaos for the situation, it won't go as smoothly as it can unless you are paying attention and following the directions of the officer. And lastly, don't try to outrun the police. There are still departments in the state of California that will chase you until they catch you. Due to liability reasons, our supervisor will ensure that does not happen. We as a policy will not chase people unless you're a violent felon, a danger to the community, then that's a different story. But there are departments, CHP, they still chase you until they catch you. And so please don't try to outrun the police. Okay, one thing I wanted to bring up real quick, there's a lot of new laws, as I mentioned, SB 14.